It is October 20, 2021, and I am here with Ella Williford Garcia. And we're going to talk a little about Ella's family history. Her father and mother came to the desert from Alaska. And not only is that a great story, but the contribution that her family has made to the Antelope Valley, particularly her father, but the whole family, is incredible. Unfortunately, I don't think we have time to do a complete Williford family history. So we are really going to sort of focus on how they got here and her father's contributions for this interview. So Ella, tell me how the Willifords got to this area.
They actually started in Downey Huntington Park, and my father always wanted to go to Alaska. So when I was 6 weeks old, they moved to Alaska, and they stayed there for 6 years. My mother said, "I'm tired of the snow. I want to go back to California." My dad said, "Fine, find me a job in California." And lo and behold, she wrote to all of the bases in this area. And Dad says he came home from work one night and Mom handed him an airplane ticket, told him he had an interview at a couple of bases, Edwards being one of them. And a few months later, we came to California. We left Alaska in July, and he started work on the base in August of '59.
That's just I could just see your mother doing that.
That was before email. It was all postas, and she had to send everything airmail, or it would take at least 2 weeks. Airmail only took about 3-4 days.
Well, tell us about what your dad did at the base.
He was a machinist by trade, and he worked on what they call the sled track. And it was what they tested the things to go to space in, the Apollo stuff and everything. They tested at Edwards Air Force Base. And he actually saved the government back in '63 about $18,000 and won an award of $715, which doesn't sound like a lot today, but that was in the '60s, so it was quite a bit.
And that's because of the work that he did on the sled track and
Yes.
that whole...
Him and another guy were the two main people that worked on it, designed it, and knew how to make it cheaper and better and easier than the contract company that they were looking at.
Yeah, and they were, I think, testing the effect of rapid acceleration and deceleration on the humans that were going to be in the vehicles that were going to be...
He also worked on making the camera steady so that they could film it better than they were able to before, because before they had to just hold the movie camera still, and he worked on the apparatus to help them make it more steady.
Then after working there for a few years, there was an accident and there was an eye injury.
He hit his head at work, and he went blind in his left eye. He had a detached and then a deteriorated retina, and he went blind in his left eye, and they wanted him to take a medical retirement. He said, "No, I'm going to get better." And they're like, and he fought his medical retirement for quite a while, about a year. He actually took the medical retirement in '65 and went into real estate then, but he loved to be in them, and he could figure out how to do anything, put anything together, take it apart. He knew how to do stuff. So
Well, because of that, though, he had time to become very involved in the
Very
community.
involved. Very involved.
So let's talk about his community involvement.
Well, the first project that I actually remember him working on that's very significant was my dad, a guy named Doug Carl, and Ron Gray put up the very first cross on the hill in Roseman. And they drove up as far as they could. Then they took a 5-gallon bucket of water, a post hole digger and a shovel, and the cross, and carried it up, which they thought was quite high at the time. And they thought that cross was way big. They said they had no idea how Jesus carried that big cross. And they put it up, and then we were living on Camden Street at the time, and they came back down and they looked at that cross, and all 3 men were very disappointed that it looked so small. Since then, they put in 3 more that it was vandalized and stuff, and then the last cross that's on the hill now was put up by another group of men involved in the community.
The Kiwanis, I believe.
The Kiwanis Club did it. They're who sponsored it. They sponsored sunrise service for years, and it was always up on the hill. It quit being on the hill about a year or so after they built the high school, because then they just went to the high school and looked at the cross from there. It was kind of a downfall to me, you know.
Well, your dad was really, really very active in the Kiwanis, and the Kiwanis certainly not only did things like the cross, I mean, they were involved in the Little Britches Rodeo, I believe. They were involved in the chili cook-off. So can you talk a little bit about...
First, before that, Wanda Kirk came to Dad because he was involved. He was the youth person of the Kiwanis. And she said, we need reading ribbons to encourage kids to read. And so he said, okay. And at that time when it started, the Kiwanis gave a ribbon to the first grade, second grade, third grade student. But after that, it became, there were so many more students, they got to where they gave them to all first grade classrooms, second grade classrooms, third grade classrooms to encourage kids to read. That was very big. They worked with, like you say, the Little Britches Rodeo. We went to a Little Britches in Tehachapi, and Dad said, Kiwanis and Roseman need to do this. So they put together the Little Britches Rodeo. It ran for several years, and it was actually the largest Little Britches this side of Denver, Colorado. They had the national finals were in Denver, and we had kids from Vegas, Colorado, Oregon, all coming to our Little Britches because they wanted to win. They gathered points all year long for a season, and then Denver, Colorado was where Littleton, Colorado was where the national finals were.
Well, and along with the Little Britches Rodeo, I know there was a Roseman Community Fair that went on for years, and your dad was very instrumental in that also.
The fair was...
The fair board.
There was a fair board, and every organization in Roseman had a booth at the fair. Certain people, clubs that did it after a few years, they had their same booth over and over and over. The ETI, which was the Equestrian Trails Incorporated, had the largest they had a double booth, but all of the churches had a booth, the 4-H Club had a booth, the Boy Scouts had a booth, the Key Club had a booth, all of the youth organizations had a booth at that fair to raise money for their own personal projects.
And the Little Britches Rodeo itself was held on the high school grounds because I know your dad and a lot of us in the community were involved in building that rodeo grounds on the high school that was built, I believe, with landing mat that came from Edwards.
Yes.
And
it was mat that they were no longer in need of, and Jerry Williams actually hauled a lot of it to Roseman. I'm sure there were other people too, but he's one of the ones I remember. And they
welded it all up to posts, and I mean the town, along with your dad, built the rodeo grounds that's at the high school.
And we built it on the high school arena, at the arena, and that was partly because Judd Lawson said,
and he was the superintendent.
He was our superintendent at the time. He said, incorporate it with the school. Someday this town may grow and they may want to shut it down. And there's the Roping and Riding Club, which also provided the livestock for the rodeo, was also through the school, so that it would be harder to close down. And when they first started to build houses around the school, people did want the arena closed, and I thought, they'll never close it as long as Dad's alive, and it's still not closed, but it is not used as much as it was then.
Yeah, well, he was also involved in the Roping and Riding Club.
Yes, he was one of their founding members.
And you mentioned ETI, Equestrian Trails Incorporated. He was involved in that.
Yes, they rode on weekend outings where they would go out for the day or for the whole weekend and camp out west of Roseman a couple of times that I know of. They camped in Tehachapi a couple of times. And every year they would have a 100-mile horseback ride from LA to the Lancaster Fairgrounds that was over on Division Street. And my grandparents and my parents and my brother older brother did it a few years. I was supposed to get to do it, but that never happened.
He didn't get to. Well, I think your dad also is responsible for getting the Kiwanis involved in the chili cook-off that was here.
Yes, he is. And a lot of people don't know this, but I know that the prisoners at Avenue I actually did the majority of the cooking, and they transported the chili from the prison to Tropical Gold Mine. And then one of the years, the Pillsbury came out with cornbread twists, and they supplied all of the cornbread and the ovens to cook them on the ground so that we could constantly have hot cornbread twists from Pillsbury that they gave out with every bowl of chili. And we had kids walking through the through the ground, there's no stands, walking through the grounds with hot baskets of cornbread twists to try and entice them to come and buy a bowl of chili, and they would get another cornbread twist.
And this was part of a fundraising booth that your dad put together, and from the proceeds of this one event, I remember they generated over $6,400.
Something like that, because I know the Boy Scouts, the band, and the 4-H club each got $2,000 something and 2 cents. Dad was always very precise in making sure everything was equally divided. And I just remember and 2 cents.
Yeah. And this was a booth that was there as a fundraising activity, in addition to the people who had come to compete in the chili cook-off.
Do their chili, yes.
Right. And you mentioned the Boy Scouts. I think your dad was instrumental in the Boy Scouts being in Roseman.
Actually, they did start before he came, but he definitely was instrumental in keeping them active. He actually, the first time he got involved with Boy Scouts was in Huntington Park with his brother-in-law. It's like my uncle. He wanted to do Boy Scouts, and my father volunteered several years in Huntington Park before they moved to Alaska. And then when we came here, my oldest brother, Russ, got involved in Boy Scout, Cub Scouts at the time, and then on to Boy Scouts. And Dad was always making sure they had money and raising money so that all the kids could go to camp and everything. We did do hay rides. Originally, they left from out by Jerry Williams' house. Then they moved them into Glendower Park, and they left from Glendower Park and went out to where they always went, out behind the mountain, and you got one hot dog, one soda, and all the marshmallows you wanted to roast. And then they put in the freeway, so they moved from the park to the high school, and we left from the arena at the high school for years until they don't really do much hay riding anymore.
Well, the whole area around the high school became surrounded with homes and difficult to get.
Yeah, it was quite. Their last time, one of the last times I remember going on a hay ride was in the 90s. I know. They had to go down streets and then up the paved road to just get to the dirt to have the hay ride.
Going back a little bit to the Kiwanis' involvement, your dad and the Kiwanis' involvement. The Kiwanis for many, many, many years had a toy giveaway at Christmas. And that went on, I don't remember how many years, because I ended up storing sometimes stuff at my house,
Dad would collect toys from Jimco, anything that was like out of the box. Maybe it had a missing part. He'd collect dolls. They wouldn't have a set, maybe half of their sets of clothes. He would ask people to make clothes for the dolls, and the trucks and tanks and all of that stuff they would fix, and they would give away at the Christmas. It started in the Roseman Post Office when it was on Diamond Street, and every kid that went got a free hot chocolate, a bag of candy, and a photo with Santa that they would just take right then. The Polaroid cameras were very popular, and Santa was always there. He never rushed the kids. They got to take time, because when it was your kid's turn, if your kid had several things to say, Santa would listen, and all of the kids and then they would everybody also got a ticket for a free drawing, and they were constantly pulling the tickets out and calling numbers. And then they moved across the street to what was the American National Bank, and because they had outgrown the post office totally, and so that's where. And the whole bank parking lot was full of kids and people getting their free hot chocolates and a picture with Santa, and there was no charge to anybody. It was all during the fundraising stuff that Kiwanis always put on.
Yeah, and, also through Kiwanis and possibly through your involvement in the 4-H and things like that. Your dad, I know you always had animals, your siblings always had animals, and your dad got very involved in the auction at the AV fair.
He actually was involved in the auction before I was even old enough for 4-H. And I can remember getting my first lamb, being totally excited I was going to get a lamb, and I got to go to the fair and show it, and I expected to bring that lamb home. And somebody asked me if I was going through auction. I said, no, I'm not selling my lamb. Dad said, oh, yes, you are. I'm like, but he's so cute. He's my pet. And Dad said, He's good for nothing. It's a wether. And I said, so? But we sold that lamb, and that lamb would follow me anywhere I went. And I didn't know why some of the 4-H kids were all bent over moving their lamb around when you could just stand up and make them follow you. But the judge said, you're supposed to hold your animal at all times. So from then on, I did.
You held her.
I didn't quite realize that.
You didn't realize what you were getting into, but your dad was very involved in the auction.
He was. In fact, he threw Kiwanis because he collected money from different things and businesses in town, and they would put up so much money, and the Kiwanis would put up so much money, and they would buy animals. Roseman kids always had the average price of whatever it was for that year for sheep, for swine, and for beef. We always had a good price because Dad worked at it.
Thanks to your dad, I ended up, I think, buying something and raising my own price one time when I went to the auction. Oh, well.
Live and learn.
Live and learn. That is correct. Your dad also was involved at the high school in forming the Key Club.
Yes, they formed the Key Club, which also now is, I don't even know of any Key Clubs, but I know Roseman no longer has a Key Club. It was a organization for young boys, men, they could be in it for 4 years through high school. And it taught them leadership and speaking and all
service
of
in general, I think.
Service in general, yes. All of the things that make you a good person.
Then you also mentioned, and I was not aware of this, your dad was part of a neighborhood committee early on when he first came to Roseman.
There was a neighborhood community youth organization, and they would put dances on at the community building during the summer months for kids to have something to do once a month in the summertime. And I know that it was before I was even old enough to go to dances or ruts, but it was something to get the youth kids off the streets on a weekend. They also, one of the things that they did to raise money through Kiwanis was about once a month during the colder seasons, they would have skating parties at the Lancaster skating rink. And
I'd forgotten that. Yeah.
they were always on Monday nights, and Kiwanis members would drive kids whose parents just wanted to leave them at Glendower and Roseman Boulevard. That's where the original library was in Roseman. And I don't know if that was the original, but in 59, that was where the library was in Roseman. And the kids would all meet there. They would leave, go to the skating rink in Lancaster over on Yucca, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
Then they would come back, and the parents could pick them all up right there. And they used to be several Kiwanis who would take extra kids. We always took 2 cars because Mom drove us kids and Dad drove extra kids that needed rides. They would have a fundraiser and fun one night a month.
Well, when you first came to Roseman, you lived on Camden. I know, but then you moved out to the country.
We moved out to, I'd say 50th Street West. Technically, we lived on the dirt road at the end of 50th. That has a name that I didn't realize until after I was married. And the actual name of that street is Iron Street. But we moved out. We bought 10 acres. We moved December 1st. And we bought a dental lab from Edwards Air Force Base. And it was twice as long as the house is now because it was sawed in half. And the front half was totally open. My mom was very adventurous. The front half was totally open because it was cut in half. And what later became their bedroom did not even have a floor because it was a cement floor on base for the heater room. And all of the doors on the hallway had numbers. So we knew, and when we were moving in, Mom would say, put that in 7, put that in 9, put that in 8. And Dad said to Mom, this is when they had finally decided to move, design the house that you would like, try not to move too many walls. And my mom designed the house. She had rolling kitchen cabinet doors way before they were very standard in any house. She had an oven that was up high. She had very modern, her cabinets were all hand built by my grandfather and my father. And she moved every wall but one.
So, I mean, I have a picture, or the Historical Society has a picture of the
house,
the dental lab portion of the house that was moved in, and I think that's a great story.
We hung a curtain at the end of the hallway, and we used 3 rooms basically. And that was when we also had milk delivered. We lived in town and had milk delivered. When we were going to move, Mom asked the milkman, do you deliver? And he goes, oh yeah, I deliver out there. And he used to come in at least once a week. He'd come in the house just after a weekend to see what we had moved where. Because he started the house, to get in the house, there was a door on the south end of the house with a milk crate and a 6x12 floor joist that stuck out the end of the house for a step. And we had that only for about 2 weeks. And then my grandfather, due to the fact that I had emergency appendicitis, made a temporary set of steps that we used for a few years. But the milkman wanted to know where we were going to put what next. And when we finally got the kitchen part done and the refrigerator where it's permanently lived, he's like, well, this isn't as much fun anymore. He goes, but you guys have done a crazy, amazing job of redesigning this house.
Well, that all of these contributions that your family has made to our area, and especially your father, really resulted in a park being named after your father. Well deserved. And we actually are going to continue this with a interview involving some pictures that we can look at. But for now, I think that we will stop, and then we'll get set up for the next phase of this. This is your family is just amazing.
We all did volunteer work for the community. The community was Dad's life. He loved helping people. He loved making things for youth kids, especially for kids who had nothing.
Yes, he was an amazing person. So thank you, Ella, for taking the time.
Thank you.
Your family came in the late 50s. These are your siblings.
Yes, this is Vicky's on this end, Russ is standing, then Dad, Mom, Omer, and I'm standing
And
also.
I think this is a few years later.
This is
in the
about
60s.
64 or so.
When your dad came, he worked as a machinist at Edwards Air Force Base. On this project specifically, which was testing, I think, the human as well as the machinery for issues with acceleration and deceleration. And your dad did some of the design and building of this track.
He made it more efficient. They had hired a company to design it, but he made it more efficient. They saved like $18,000 a foot with Dad's design. And then he also designed this camera holder to keep the camera balanced and more still while they're filming. because it would, otherwise the film would be a little shaky. This made it much more stabler.
Your dad was very involved in community fair activities, and he was one of the founders of the Roseman Community Fair and the Little Britches Rodeo.
This is Russ riding a bull. It was a great rodeo. It was for youth kids 8 to 18, and they had all events like a regular rodeo. This is Vicky. She's just finished tying the ribbon on the goat's tail. The younger girls tied the ribbon. The older girls had to tie the goat kind of like you tie a calf, 3 legs. And this is Sheriff John.
Yes, I think Channel 5 was involved in our fair for several years, and that's how we got Sheriff John.
If you'll notice, his tie that he's wearing says Community Fair. The other side says Roseman. It is from that day.
Your dad and the Kiwanis were also involved in having a booth at the Chili Cook-Off that, along with sponsorship from Pillsbury, raised money for several local organizations.
The 4-H, the Key Club, and Pillsbury actually donated all of our cornbread twists that they had just come out with and the ovens to cook it in. They gave us shirts. That's Russ in one of the Carol Shelby shirts. The kids all got Pillsbury shirts. This is Christy and Russ again. And they're steering the chili. The chili was all cooked by the prisoners at Mariloma. Carol Shelby donated the chili.
Your dad, along with the Kiwanis, always had a Christmas toy giveaway for the kids in Roseman. And they got a toy and they got pictures. Your brother Russ was our Santa Claus.
This is Bobby Maley getting ready for one of the drawings to give away one of the toys. Every kid got a ticket to win an extra toy in line. This is Russ playing Santa and Omer, who normally takes all the kids' pictures, but in this picture, obviously somebody else is taking it.
And because of your dad, Kodak donated all the film for
Yes.
these pictures that the kids could have. Your dad, again, along with Kiwanis, was instrumental in getting the circus here one Mother's Day.
It was more exciting, or as exciting, watching the elephants work, total by voice commands to put the tents up, pull the ropes, take them down. It was really interesting.
Yeah. Well, the Boy Scouts were just always very, very important to your dad. This is the typical Boy Scout fleur-de-lis that he made for one of the Christmas parades. But your father was just very, very, very supportive of Troop 41, the local Boy Scout troop.
This is they're on a float for one of the parades. Those are the hay trailers. They use those every full moon for a hay ride.
Yeah, I think the Boy Scouts did that. We also had a very active equestrian trail horse group here in town who sponsored day rides, overnight rides. This is your dad and
Bud Jackman and George Webb.
Up at the Webb cabin, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is Ellen Carl Barron, Cecil Burton, George, my mom and dad.
And this was on one of the rides up in the Tehachapi's.
Yes.
And then we also had Jim Canas that the group sponsored. Here some of the people are just having a little respite. Ellen, your mom, your dad, George Webb, and Eileen Webb. Your dad and the Kiwanis were very active in getting this facility for seniors in Roseman. The groundbreaking, it was your dad, your mom, Larry Shimboli, Rule Williams, Jolene DeSico, the Dumans, Clark Harshfield, Jerry Winfrey, Andy Anderson, and Dolores Julian, who all participated in the groundbreaking. You're going to see the construction right here. And look at the space around, which is no longer space around.
It's amazing how the things have changed.
How things have changed, I know. This is the dedication of the senior housing facility, initially called Golden Hills, but we had to change the name to Rosamond Hills because another corporation had the Golden Hills name. There's the building without the crowd in front of it.
And the small trees.
Yes. You'll see in a second what the building looked like in 2021. It's really a lush little oasis, and it is for seniors age 62 and older or persons with disabilities.
That was very...
Very, very important. It is now called Rosamond Hills. And it has really, I think, been a very important contribution. It was actually expanded in the early 90s, so this is an aerial view of the entire complex. There are 78 apartments with a manager's unit.
This is the dedication of the Jim Williford Park. The Rosamond Community Service District, also known as the Water Company, asked if there a community member that somebody feels should have the park named for them. And Jerry Winfrey submitted my dad's name, Jim Williford, and it was voted to call the Jim Williford Park. Anything that went on in Rosamond with youth from 59 through 2005, he was volunteered with, worked for, raised money for. And the youth and the seniors were the biggest part of his life. He enjoyed it 100%.
Well, your dad was certainly a pillar and driving force in the community of Rosamond during that time frame. And we were very fortunate to have your family here. Your family has been incredible as far as participation and in the community. And Ella, it's just been an honor to talk to you and relive some of your family history with you. We appreciate it.
It's been very fun on my part too, going through the old stuff, looking at the different things, seeing, remembering. It's been enjoyable.
Well, thank you, Ella.
You're very welcome.